Today, we are going to talk about a guy named Russ Weiner. Russ is a billionaire, a multi-billionaire actually. He made his money after he gambled his life savings to launch an energy brand called Rockstar. This is a gamble that would pay off in a big way after he sold the company to PepsiCo in 2020 in a deal worth around $4 billion. But the reason that we're talking about Russ today actually has nothing to do with his success with energy drinks. Today, we're going to talk about how this guy got basically addicted to flipping mansions all over the country and how he has kind of surprisingly made an absolute fortune doing it. Some people argue that buying these ultra luxury mansions is not always the greatest investment, which is true. A lot of times these homes sell at a premium and then they actually lose value over the following years as they age. But what's cool is that Russ has made tens of millions of dollars flipping these mansions, and he has a pretty unique strategy on exactly how he's been so successful every time, which we'll be talking about today. Russ Weiner has flipped about 12 properties over the past 20 years, all in the roughly $25 to $35 million price point. And most recently, he started to sell off most of what he owns so he can dedicate all of his investments and attention to Florida, which we'll also get more into later in this episode. Today, let's talk about exactly how the Rockstar energy drink creator got so addicted to flipping luxury real estate, and let's take a look at some of his coolest and most profitable deals together. Before we get into the houses, just a little more backstory on Russ in case anybody is curious. He grew up in the Bay Area, and he's the son of a political commentator named Michael Savage. And early on in Russ's life, he tried to follow in his father's footsteps and get into politics. In 1998, he ran for the 6th district seat in the California State Assembly, but he ended up losing that election to a Democrat. To be honest, I don't even know what that position is. Even though Russ's stint in politics wasn't exactly a success, during that time he did catch the attention of a guy who was in the beverage industry named Maurice Canbar. He ended up offering Russ a job. So Russ worked for this company called Sky Vodka for about a year. I'm sure you guys have heard of them. It was during this time, though, where he got the inspiration to branch off on his own and create an energy drink. In 2001, Russ took out a $50,000 mortgage on his condo in California. He left Sky Vodka and he founded Rockstar Energy Drink. He ended up having a long run with Rockstar. This company actually ended up being one of the top 3 energy drink brands in North America by 2007. So it was long before he even sold the company that he became a billionaire. Like I mentioned earlier, though, Russ tapped out of the energy drink business in 2020 when he sold Rockstar Energy to PepsiCo in a $3.85 billion deal. Now, on the real estate front, Russ has been involved in real estate basically his entire adult life. He started in 2001, so he's got over 2 decades buying, renovating, and selling houses. What's crazy too is from what I can tell, he has never lost money on a deal. Except for technically one house. He actually did lose $1 million on this one property, but I would not consider that his fault. It's kind of a confusing story, but we'll talk about that one later in the video. Every other property that Russ has bought, though, he either 1, negotiated a crazy good price on the house itself, or 2, he's bought the house, renovated it, added a bunch of value, and then sold it for a big profit. At this point, he's done around a dozen deals in total, and we don't have time to look at them all today, but I picked out a handful of my favorites that I want to look at with you guys. I want to talk about exactly what his investment strategy was on each one of these deals. We can look at what he bought the house for, we can look at what he sold these houses for, and of course, we need to look at some of the photos together too. Okay, so for the first house that I want to look at today is cool for 2 reasons. For one, I like the style the most myself. It's very contemporary, and he doesn't do a lot of contemporary style homes, but for 2, I think this house is a great representation of his buying strategy, which is cool. So let's start there. Check this out. If we go down to the price history on this house, this home was sold in 2008 to somebody for $4.5 million. That person built it out into what it is today. They relisted it for sale in 2015 for $28 million. It sold someone else in 2016 for $27 million. So the original buyer actually lost $1 million on this deal. But going through the entire price history, so that person who bought it in 2016 relisted it for sale a couple years later for $29 million. and they basically just kept dropping the price and dropping the price. Well, this is when he noticed the opportunity of a home that was sitting on the market for over 1 year with a bunch of price drops. So what I read in the Wall Street Journal is that part of his buying strategy is he looks for these properties that have been on the market a long time and who have had a bunch of price drops, and that's when he kind of comes in and pounces on them. So he offers them this crazy low number of $16,515,000. It was probably a cash offer. These guys paid $27 million for the house. So they lost $10 million when they sold this house to Russ. This is what the house looks like from the street. It's got amazing curb appeal as far as I'm concerned. You've got to drive down into the garage from the street, but look at that. There's probably enough room for like what? I would guess at least 8 or 10 cars in there. Inside, one thing I like about the finish palette right off the bat is that it's not all that wild and eccentric like some spec developers do. You've just got white oak on the floor, white walls, a pretty neutral kitchen. It's very dark, but neutral. We're in the bird streets, so the views are amazing. You're not looking out at any power lines or obstructions. That's your view from your swimming pool. Like, this is like a picture perfect LA home as far as I'm concerned. It was pretty much a brand new construction home whenever Russ came in and bought this place. And so, I mean, you look at a house like this and you think, okay, I'm a billionaire. I've got all this money in the bank. I can scoop this thing up for pennies on the dollar because the seller's in a distressed situation. That's exactly what he did. He's probably going to do better off putting his money into a house like this versus putting it into the S&P 500. Before we move on to the next one, though, I will say this wasn't a home run for him yet. Remember, he immediately relisted it for sale for $28 million. He actually did drop the price quite a bit over the course of the next couple of years, and he has since taken this house off the market altogether. Regardless of what he's doing with it, as long as he just sits on it and maintains it and it doesn't like fall down the hill or burn down or something, he's probably going to do all right on this house once he does eventually resell it. Okay, now we're going over to Aspen, Colorado to talk about another very cool house and another great representation on Russ's investment strategy, and that is targeting homes where you can buy the house for less than the replacement value, meaning you can buy the house for less than it would cost to rebuild the house. This place was originally listed for sale in October 2019 for $28 million. And once again, after several price drops and over a year on the market, Russ scooped it up for $21.7 million. The house is 9,600 square feet, so he paid like $2,200 a square foot to buy this place, which sounds insane, but according to some people reporting on this story, that's about what it costs to build a modern high-end home in Aspen, Colorado. So from that standpoint, again, he's getting the house for basically replacement cost, and that doesn't even include the money that he's getting in land value. Not exactly sure what perspective we're starting at here, but I guess this is the front door over here, this glass door, and so kind of cool. You're walking along this water feature and fire feature on your way to the front door. Inside, another mild finish palette and another house with amazing views. You know, I don't know much about Aspen real estate. To me, this is not a $22 million kitchen, but maybe that's just what you get out there. This is, on the other hand, a $22 million living room. Like, can you imagine hanging out here at the end of the night and looking out to that view? Of course, you got to have a bunch of fireplaces in a house if you live in Colorado. It gets chilly out there. I don't know if this is the master bedroom or what, but it's crazy. It feels like it's just straight up floating over the forest. These photos must be from one of the last times that Russ had this place listed, because look at that, a Rockstar poker table. But yeah, whether you're living in this place in the summertime when the grass is green or the wintertime where there's snow everywhere, I've never been to Aspen, but it looks epic. I'd love to have a place here one day, or at least just call this a place that I visit someday. Let's talk about the investment strategy with this one, though. So this is another scenario where he buys it in December of 2020 for basically $22 million. And then about 6 months later, he relists it for $40 million. Then he even ups the price more to $42 million. So he's shooting for the moon. He's trying to basically double his money on this deal. Well, it must not have sold, because by February of 2022, he listed the place for rent for $30,000. And then listing removed tells me that it was probably rented out. He listed it again for rent a little later. Then he took the listing off. So this is probably one of those properties, if I had to guess, that he decided he's just going to hang on to it. I mean, if you can make $30,000 per month on a house that someone's going to very lightly use while they're visiting Aspen, and that's not a bad investment to hold on to. You just collect a good security deposit, make sure there's very light wear and tear on the house, and it's going to be worth at least $22 million when he goes to sell it down the road. If anything, I would say this is a market where house prices probably appreciate more than the national average. All right, now we're on to Beverly Hills, and we've got a house that's, I guess, got some history. This one was once owned by Madonna. Let's go back to the price history, another interesting price history here. So Madonna, from what I understand, originally sold this house way back in 2013. So this was her resale. She sold it for $19.5 million at the time. Whoever bought the house from Madonna for $19.5 million resold it to Russ just a few years later. So he pays $19 million for this house in 2015. That was almost $10 million less than the seller was asking, and $500,000 less than they originally paid. The story on this one is that he did renovate the place. I think it was a light renovation, but he did do some remodeling before he eventually relisted it. The house has this long, dramatic approach. In here, you've got the main home, plus there's 2 additional separate detached guest houses. It's a huge lot. It's like, I think 1.1 acres. Hard telling what renovations he did. I'm gonna guess new flooring and new paint. The windows appear to be original, or if they're not, he made them look like they're original. The kitchen's definitely new. It's nice. It goes with the period of the house, I'd say. The way he was marketing this place is that it was basically a completely turnkey move-in ready estate, which is nice. A lot of these older homes like this, they're typically kind of dated and need some work. He found a buyer pretty quick, which isn't very surprising considering the nice renovations inside, the nice staging job inside, the nice big 1+ acre lot, all these lush grounds. But look, check it out. So remember, he paid $19 million. I already put about $2 million into the renovation, and then he relisted it for $45 million, which is a little wild. But eventually, he finally resold the house for $29.5 million in 2021. So you do the math, after commissions and everything were paid, he made something like $5 million on this flip. Next up, we are going to, not back to Aspen, even though it looks like it, we're going to Park City, Utah to look at a house that Russ bought in 2022 for almost $40 million. So we got not only a very, very prime location that we're working with here, but the house seems to have had a world-class team of architects and designers behind putting it together. I mean, look at it. This is a pretty wow factor design, if you ask me. This kitchen is kind of a weird mix between like industrial and modern barn house, but I don't know, for some reason I kind of like it. The house was featured in a bunch of magazines and a bunch of press featured it when it was first built. It's huge too. The place has over 18,000 square feet. If you notice in a lot of these pictures, the lighting looks kind of unique. In the description, it actually says that there's like some special circadian rhythm lighting throughout this house. There's an indoor sports court and rock climbing wall in here, although no pads, so don't fall down. I've seen this before in these like ski resort properties. I'm not sure what this is, but it almost looks like lockers to put your stuff when you go out to ski. It's kind of weird because this is not a commercial property. This is a residence. Yeah, look, they got the entire ceiling covered in these skis. That's a pretty cool detail, I'm not gonna lie. The features just go on and on. There's a bowling alley in here. There is a massage room in here. You have an indoor heated swimming pool, of course. What I'm gathering is that it was around the time that he bought this place in Park City where he said, you know what, I'm going to buy properties in A+ locations that are award-winning type properties or properties that are really well done, and then I'm just going to sit on them and let appreciation do his thing. Okay, next let's go to the one property that I mentioned earlier that Russ bought where he actually ended up losing some money, unfortunately. You can see this one last sold for $25 million in 2023. So here's the deal with this one. Russ bought this place in 2015. He paid $18.6 million. He proceeded to put about $5 million into a renovation here. So now he's into the place for what? Let's call it about 24 million bucks. Well, he relisted it for sale in 2020 for $31 million. He tried to rent it out for a little while. He relisted it for sale again, and as typical with a lot of his properties, there's a lot of crazy price history, but by 2023, he finally sells it for $25 million. So you might be thinking, oh, he was only into it for $24 million and he resells it for 25, he made $1 million bucks, right? Well, not necessarily, because unfortunately, with where this mansion is located, he had to not only pay the real estate commissions that you got to pay when you sell a house, but he also had to pay a 5.5% mansion tax on this sale. After all is said and done, Russ lost something like $1 million on this deal, which is kind of a bummer because if it wasn't for the mansion tax, he actually would have done all right here. Okay, guys, now we're on to Florida, which is where I understand that Russ is spending most of his time and most of his money lately. Apparently, that's why he sold a lot of his other real estate, is so that he could make room for more Florida real estate. This house in particular here, though, he has bought and sold. This was one of his first Florida deals, from what I understand. So he scooped this place up way back in 2010. Where are we? Okay, so 2010, he buys this spot for $6.75 million. He spends about a year remodeling it. It's a big house. It's a 20,000 square foot house, gated house. I mean, you could see this is a pretty grand place. It's got like, I think 8 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms, similar to his other houses. It's not all that fancy or wild and crazy, but it's clean. It's simple. It's got nice wood floors, white walls. There's not much to it, but kind of in a good way. Very random, but look at that kitchen sink. This is one critique I guess I'll give to the house. Like, who could actually wash a dish in that sink? It looks cool, but very impractical. And speaking of impractical, so this is the master bedroom. I bet you that bed right there is a king-size bed. It looks pretty much like an air mattress in this room. This is absolutely ridiculous. This room's got to be at least 2,000 square feet. One of the biggest perks about this property, though, is obviously being right on the water. I mean, anything that's sitting on the water like this is almost always going to sell at a premium. As far as price history goes, though, okay, so remember, he buys it in 2010. He sinks like $2 million into it. He ends up listing it for sale and rent a couple of times, but he resells it in 2012 for $14.5 million. I think he actually sold this one to Birdman. So it wasn't an absolute home run of a deal, but he made a couple $1,000,000 for one of his first house flips. It's no wonder he got the itch to keep doing more. Here's another one of his Florida homes. This one he bought in 2016 for almost $20 million. He tried to resell it for $35 million at one point. Apparently, at another point, he got an offer of $60 million for this house, which he turned down because, remember, it was somewhere at this stage in his life where Russ got that advice from his mentor, where it was like, you know what, I regret every house I've ever sold. So if you buy a good piece of real estate in a good location, just hang on to it. It's basically only going to continue to go up in value. And then the last one we need to talk about, you guys, is the massive waterfront estate that Russ Weiner is building in Miami Beach. He's kind of calling this one his crown jewel. This is by far the biggest project he's taken on yet. There's kind of a lot going on here, but I'm going to give you guys the gist of what I think is happening according to the different stories that I read on this. So he owns this corner lot here, which is obviously great for water frontage, but it also has this older house on it, which I think he is partially renovating. There was a historic home also on this property, which he apparently paid $1 million to relocate to another part of the property because he wanted to save it. Then this in-between house, see this one right here? I guess this one is owned by some other super high net worth people who are wrapped up in this crazy divorce. He wants to own that one, but he can't yet because of the whole divorce situation that's happening. But then he owns the compound next door as well, which you can kind of see there's a lot of construction happening in this shot. So yeah, look, from this angle, you've got this property, which belongs to Russ. Then you've got this one over here on the left, which also belongs to him. He paid $35 million for these two properties in total back in 2021, I think it was. I just realized the view on Google gives us a much more current photo of what's going on here. So yeah, this is the lot that we were just looking at. He has basically torn down almost everything at this point. I don't even know where that historic house was that he relocated. And then this is the other one. He's leveled that lot as well. I realize this is a first world problem situation, but can you imagine how frustrating it would be if you owned this lot and you own this lot? You paid $35 million for the pair, and then all you want to do is just own this little strip in between, but the divorcing billionaires won't sell it to you. Like, I don't know. It's kind of funny. You can't make this stuff up. Anyways, the house that he originally bought in 2021 right here, this is the one that we just saw that is basically completely torn down at this point. It's very dated. I understand why he tore it down. It kind of has like Palace of Versailles vibes in a weird way. Doesn't look like a house that a billionaire would want to own and live in. It needs to be more of a bachelor pad, in my opinion. You know, when you're someone like this guy who's got all the money in the world and you want to live waterfront, go play with your toys in the water and take your yacht out and stuff like that, like, you don't want a house that looks like this. I get it. The only thing that I'll critique, that I get comments about a lot when I make videos about Florida properties, is that if you get the wrong hurricane or a little sea level rising action happening, this property is definitely going to be at risk. But if this guy's spending upwards of $100 million on this place, which is what most reports are saying, he's probably not all that concerned about sea levels rising. That's all I've got. Hit the subscribe button if you guys aren't subscribed already. I'd love to see us get to 100,000 sometime in the next, I don't know, 12 months. I'll see you guys next week.